Commissioner Morset,
Here.
Commissioner Poole,
Here.
Commissioner Silverstein here. I need a motion for approval of the April 21st, 2022 meeting.
I'll move.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Field Enforcement Director report. Mr. George.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you. For those on the meeting that are unfamiliar with me, my name's Bill George. I'm the Director of the Field Enforcement Division for the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. We've been very busy since the last meeting. As far as the enforcement effort goes, we've had 8 violations that we've discovered working in the field, our agents. 3 of which were alcohol violations, exclusively 4 of which were tobacco violations, and then the 8th violation was one that included both alcohol and tobacco violations. We discovered and investigated violations in a variety of different jurisdictions, which include Baltimore City, Prince George's County, Cecil County, Harford County, Washington County, Anne Arundel County, and Montgomery County. As a result of those investigations, our agents seized quite a bit of contraband product. That would include 4,220 packs of contraband cigarettes, 938 sticks of contraband other tobacco products, 143 containers of contraband hookah tobacco, 14,940 containers of contraband chewing tobacco and snuff, 222 containers of distilled spirits, 496 containers of wine, 1,703 containers of beer. These investigations also resulted in criminal charges being placed against 10 individuals. The charges ranged from transportation of both untaxed cigarettes and other tobacco products, possession of untaxed cigarettes and other tobacco products, alcohol sales without a license, and possession of untaxed alcohol products. I would say one of the highlights of this past month since the last meeting was our collaboration with the partners that we work with. And that collaboration and partnership ranged in levels from providing support such as security during the execution of a search warrant to full operational support. And first and foremost, our strongest partners in just about all of our efforts are the agents and inspectors of the Comptroller's Field Enforcement Bureau. And this month, along with other agencies, we had the support from the Baltimore City Police Department, the Prince George's County Police Department, the Montgomery County Police Department, Maryland State Police, the Maryland Transportation Authority Police, and liquor board members from Baltimore City, Montgomery County, and Anne Arundel County. One of the more pressing and ongoing investigative efforts we've been working on has been it continues to be ongoing. So I'll speak in general terms. We're working with the Baltimore City Police Department and the liquor board in the city, offering the expertise of our agents in both surveillance techniques and the enforcement of unlicensed sales of alcoholic beverages. That particular operation opened up for us the weekend of Friday, the 22nd of April. And I'm pleased to say that we, on that opening weekend, we're able to impact the problem that was being addressed in a positive way by carrying out an enforcement action that involved charging 2 individuals and a seizure of contraband alcoholic beverages. Seems to have set the tone for the problem in the area. It's continued since that point, and things are going well. And the ATC as a viable, exceptional partner. I'm happy to say that our inspection goals, as an agency of retailers, of alcohol and tobacco products have exceeded our goals as by the end of April. By the end of April, the beginning of May. So basically, in short, we have met all of our, we've met the goals for doing our retail inspections. So, anything past the end of April is going to be exceeding the goals even further, and I'm sure yield a plethora of additional enforcement action. In addition to both the inspection enforcement action, our Regulatory Administrative Services Bureau works through a renewal period for the statewide alcohol and tobacco licenses. In the interim between the last meeting and this meeting, those licenses expired after April 30th, and as a result, I'm happy to say that our licensing unit has 619 of those licenses active and renewed for the 2022-2023 license cycle. There still are 128 licenses that continue to be pending renewal for a variety of different reasons, and we're working through those. Also, over in the administrative services side, the Research and Administrative Support Unit has prepared a feasibility study that's due to the Governor's Office and the General Assembly for final editing. The study is to assess the feasibility of maintaining a statewide database of all the alcoholic beverage licensees and to update that annually, and a database of individuals trained and licensed by an authorized alcohol awareness training program. So I estimate by the time we meet again, that feasibility study will be complete, and sometime in the interim, you will be presented with it. The commission will. So that is all I have, unless there are any questions.
The only comment I would have, and I think fellow commissioners would echo it, we think the staff is doing an outstanding job meeting and exceeding those goals. And we know it's due to the leadership on all levels, and we thank you all very much for what you're doing on behalf of the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. So I'll yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're going to have a legal and legislative report. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Prior to me beginning, I see that Roman numeral number 2 on the agenda is approval of the April 21, 2022 minutes. I don't know if the commission had an opportunity to approve those minutes. I just don't want to necessarily skip an agenda item. I'll defer to you,
I think
sir.
we did approve those minutes.
Oh, those were?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry, I apologize. I was like looking
not a
down
problem.
to check it off. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for trying to keep us on track.
Thanks for keeping me on track. I'm going to now share my screen, and I apologize if there's a delay. I am much more Zoom oriented, but I'm going to go ahead and, can everyone see my screen right now?
Yes.
All right, great. So I'm going to go through these materials. This is essentially all of the alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, and legislation that was passed or did not pass this past legislative session, and also provide an update to the commission on our alcohol compliance bulletin and our COMAR update and our MOU update. So please bear with me, and we will go through all of these items. Can everyone still see my screen?
No.
That just dropped off. There we go. Work now? Perfect. Sorry about that. So first, we'll jump into alcoholic beverage legislation. The first bill that passed, and it had actually been introduced a number of times, was House Bill 7, Senate Bill 772, House Bill 324, and this bill creates or requires that the study be conducted by the Governor's Office of Small Minority and Women-Owned Businesses for the purposes of gauging participation for purposes of gauging minority participation in the wineries, distilleries, and breweries industry. This bill had been introduced, I believe, 3 times prior, and it just didn't get across the finish line. This year it got across the finish line. The Alcohol and Tobacco Commission will be involved in the study. I believe that the process starts at the beginning of the new fiscal year, and we'll keep the commission abreast of any developments with the study. Senate Bill 476 and House Bill 550. This was an extension of the direct shipping ability of Maryland's breweries, distilleries, and wineries. If you recall, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a governor's executive order which granted the ability to do direct ship from the manufacturer to the customer during the pandemic. Once the executive order was rescinded, there was legislation passed in 2021 which allowed for the shipping privilege to continue until the end of this year, this calendar year. This legislation extended it out until June 30th, 2022. The next bill is Senate Bill 569 and House Bill 924. This is a very nuanced bill dealing with Maryland wineries. Most generally, Maryland wineries have to use at least 51% of their grapes or grape juice used in the manufacturing of wine. Those grapes have to be from Maryland. If you can't meet that threshold, you have to get a waiver, and they've extended essentially the deadline for the waiver until 2024. I believe it was going to lapse this year. Senate Bill 594, and then we'll cover Senate Bill 698 and House Bill 854 kind of together. 594 creates the Winery and Vineyard Economic Development Grant Program. Essentially, this is a new fund for wineries to recuperate some of the capital investment costs they are either going to outlay in the future or they've already outlaid. And it requires that I believe it's the Department of Commerce come up with criteria and guidance in terms of awarding these monies. That's something new that passed this year. The second bill is Senate Bill 698 and House Bill 854. This bill creates a new commission and actually reconstitutes a current commission. It's the Maryland Alcohol Manufacturing Advisory Commission. This was formerly called the Advisory Commission on Maryland Wine and Grape Growing. And so this commission used to provide information to the Director of Agriculture, as to whether or not certain thresholds were met so that wineries could get a waiver for that 51% rule that I previously told you about. What this bill does is it now creates a commission with wineries, breweries, and distilleries, and creates a fund to issue grants to nonprofits and local jurisdictions to promote the winery, brewery, and distillery industries. So this could be tours, this could be information to grape growers on how to grow certain strands of grapes or certain barley for breweries. So it's a pretty interesting grant program, and we'll see kind of how it plays out after July 1st. But the Alcohol Tobacco Commission is going to be part of recommendations to the Department of Agriculture. So we're really excited about this bill and participating. And then House Bill 1253. House Bill 1253 was a cleanup bill as part of House Bill 1052 passed in 2019. The powers that were formerly held within the Comptroller's Office and the Field Enforcement Division were transferred over to the Alcohol Tobacco Commission. And so while that first piece of legislation dealt with a lot of alcohol tobacco laws, there are still quite a few alcohol tobacco laws which need to be amended to ensure that the appropriate powers and authority are with the Alcohol Tobacco Commission. And so House Bill 1253 was a part of that, taking some tobacco regulations and putting them within the ambit of the Alcohol Tobacco Commission. And it also allows the Alcohol Tobacco Commission to enter into MOUs particularly the Office of the Executive Director, with other agencies, state and federal, in order to continue to enforce alcohol and tobacco regulations in the state of Maryland. Here are some statewide bills, just briefly, that didn't pass. There was another grocery bill, and for those of you who are not familiar, there's been a push in the legislature the last couple of years to have, or at least the conversation, to be started to have grocery stores allow them to sell beer and wine. So we had a couple of bills that dealt with that. House Bill 506, House Bill 858 were similar. They did not make it out of committee. They did not receive favorable reports. Another bill was Senate Bill 793, and this is the ready-to-go cocktails. Sure, you see them at your local liquor store. They are like the margarita in a can. And currently, those are taxed at spirit levels, which are $1.50 per gallon. The industry wanted to have this product taxed at the beer rate, which is essentially 40 cents per gallon. And so it's 9 cents per gallon for beer and 40 cents a gallon for wine. So I apologize, but that did not come out of committee. So, this is still an ongoing conversation. In fact, earlier today, when I was at a MALA meeting, which is the Maryland Association of License Authorities for the state of Maryland, there were some distillers on that phone call who raised an issue of the tax rate and how that may come back to the legislature next year. Some local bills that did not pass. There was a bill in Montgomery County that would have awarded a Class D beer wine license, a retail license, to a Class 8 farm brewery. That would have allowed the farm brewery to sell other people's beer and wine. And that was looked at as something that was undermining the three-tier system. In Washington County, there was House Bill 1117, and House Bill 1117 would have actually, part of it was a cafe bill. The other part of it would have allowed retail establishments, B licenses, C licenses, D licenses, to buy from other retailers. And this would wholly undermine the three-tier system. That was defeated as well. Move on to the next slide. Tobacco-related legislation. There was really no major tobacco legislation that passed the General Assembly this year. There were a few bills out there that would have allowed local jurisdictions to regulate the sale and distribution of cigarettes and electronic smoking devices. And those bills died in committee. There was one that would have allowed local jurisdictions across the state, one that would have allowed this privilege in Baltimore City. And then in Prince George's County, you saw some other legislation that was introduced late in the session that would have limited other tobacco product licenses from being issued specifically in Prince George's County. Now on to the cannabis-related legislation. Key to note are House Bill 1, which is a constitutional amendment that is going to be before the voters this November 2022. And it asks a simple question. Do you favor the legalization of the use of cannabis by an individual who is at least 21 years of age on or after July 1st, 2023 in the state of Maryland? So if that referendum passes, then we come back to House Bill 837, which kicks off a lot of other things. There are funds that were created by this piece of legislation. There's amendments to the criminal law article dealing with penalties for possession of cannabis. There's some tax write-offs for, I believe it's going to be this calendar year for 2022. And it requires a number of studies to be conducted by the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. Of import is a section in the uncodified language which requires the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission and the Alcohol Tobacco Commission to conduct a study on how the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission comes under the ambit of the Office of the Executive Director of the Alcohol Tobacco Commission. And I do want to thank, and I think I saw him sign up earlier, I do want to thank Will Tilburg, who is the Executive Director of the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. We've actually met with that organization twice already. We're set to meet with them again next week and have this ongoing conversation as instructed by the legislature to see how we combine those organizations and make some recommendations to the legislature. That recommendation is due by January of 2023.
Quick question.
Just some other statewide bills that did not pass the Maryland General Assembly. You saw.
Tom, can you hold up for a second? I
Yes.
think Commissioner Poole had a question.
Sure.
Just a quick question. I apologize to interrupt your flow. This legislation though gives the Alcohol Tobacco Tax Commission regulatory authority over the retail sale of cannabis products in the state of Maryland. Is that correct?
That is incorrect, sir.
Incorrect.
Incorrect. In the codified language, what the language actually specifically asks is it says the intent of the Maryland legislature is to have the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission come under the authority of the Office of the Executive Director of the Alcohol Tobacco Commission. So to combine, it says the intent is to. It does not provide any regulatory authority. This is more of the General Assembly's way of saying, if we were going to do something, and it's just looking at staff and some policy questions, but if we were going to do something, what would the staffing structure look like? And so right now we're in that conversation with the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission to provide recommendations to the Maryland General Assembly as to what that would look like.
Copy that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
No problem. Just getting back to these cannabis bills, there were just three, and I'll go over quickly. The first is Senator Feldman's bill, and that bill really created a regulatory structure and a taxing structure for cannabis. And that was contingent on the passage of the constitutional amendment, which I just talked about. That did not pass, but some of the recommendations made in Senator Feldman's bill did make it into House Bill 837, which did pass. And then there were Senator Carter and I believe Delegate Acevedo's bill, which would have just been cannabis legalization bills. They would not, separate and apart from any constitutional amendment. It would be straight legalization, and they created a structure for taxing and for authority over cannabis regulation. That did not pass as well. So that's kind of where we are. The conversation on cannabis is postponed essentially, and we're going to have a fuller, more robust conversation in terms of taxing and regulation in 2023 if the constitutional amendment is approved by the voters. I'll now, before I move on to any of the alcohol compliance bulletin and the COMAR update and MOU update, does anybody have any questions in regards to the legislation dealing with alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis that I reviewed? If not, I will move on to our alcohol compliance bulletin. So this past Monday, the Alcohol Tobacco Commission issued Alcohol Compliance Bulletin 22001. And just to level set with the commission, prior to the constitution of the Alcohol Tobacco Commission, the Field Enforcement Division, then of the Comptroller's Office, used to issue advisories, releases, bulletins on tobacco and alcohol related matters. So what we're doing is we're carrying over that structure, we're rebranding it, we're renaming it, and specifically to this particular bulletin, our alcohol compliance bulletins is our way of providing interpretive guidance to stakeholders as to how we view the regulations. It's one thing to read a regulation, and if you've ever read COMAR, I believe I'll quote Kevin Addix, who said, when you read COMAR, you can almost, go to sleep reading it. So we get that from our stakeholders, and what we want to do is try to make this information as accessible as possible. So in our compliance bulletin, the most recent one that we had, we looked at social media and the usage of social media by wholesalers and or solicitors to the benefit of retailers in terms of the difference between promoting the product, which is what wholesalers and solicitors do, and then promoting the retail establishment, which is really what they're not supposed to do, and or give social media templates to the retail establishment to use for them to promote their own establishments. What we want to try to do is maintain balance in the marketplace. That way, one group doesn't get the opportunity that another group doesn't get. So specifically, this bulletin lets wholesalers and solicitors know that they can't give something of value, which is prohibited by state law, and they can't relieve a retailer of an ordinary business expense, which is, within the ambit of regulation. So, for example, if I create a general social media template as a solicitor and I give it to a retailer, that is in violation of the rules, because normally that retailer that would be an ordinary business expense for the retailer to incur in terms of making a social media advertisement. Same thing if we have a solicitor or wholesaler creating an advertisement, even for some promotional event that a wholesaler is having at a retailer's location. That is a benefit that a retailer is receiving that not any other benefit that any other retailer is receiving. If you're going to offer this benefit to, a large retail, institution or a fancy restaurant, you need to, offer it to, a local, your mom and pop liquor store that's on the corner. What we want is a fair playing field. So that's kind of, essentially what this bulletin says. And, please, if there's anybody out there watching, please feel free to give me a call or give our office a call, 410-260-7434, if you want to discuss the bulletin further. Are there any questions by the commission about the bulletin? Hearing none, we'll move on to our COMAR update. The Alcohol Tobacco Commission and the Office of the Comptroller have been working diligently together to recodify a number of regulations that are in the name of the Comptroller, but need to be transitioned over to the Alcohol Tobacco Commission, because that's really where the authority lies. So we worked together with the head of law and policy for the Comptroller, Krista Sermon, and really want to thank her for her participation. We went through all of the current regulations, and we're in our final processes before we submit them to the Division of State Documents for publication in the Maryland Register. And then we'll actually have regulations, ATC regulations concerning alcohol and concerning tobacco. So we're really excited that this is the first step of the process. The first step is recodification. And later in the year, we're going to, look at our rules and regulations to update them. There are regulations that we want to publish later in the year regarding electronic smoking devices, other tobacco products, potential use of social media and things of that nature. So, this is the first step. First step, we need it in our name. Second step, we can build it out. So we're appreciative of all the work that the Comptroller staff has done with us. And right now, our draft rules are being reviewed by the Attorney General's office prior to submission. So does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Hearing none, I'll move on to the next item, which is our MOU update. As the commission knows, in 2019, with the passage of, I think it was actually in 2020. In 2020, the legislature came back after the passage of House Bill 1052, and they passed Senate Bill 911, which required or authorized the Alcohol Tobacco Commission and the Comptroller's Office to enter into an MOU agreement for the purposes of sharing information, personnel, and resources as it related to the enforcement of the alcohol and tobacco laws in the state of Maryland. Our current MOU with the Comptroller's Office ends on June 30th, 2022. We have drafted, and we're in the process of drafting an amended document. There are very, very small minor changes that we're making to the document, given the recent passage of House Bill 1253 that I mentioned earlier. They're being reviewed by the Attorney General and Comptroller's Office, and once they're reviewed, we'll come back to the commission with that document for final review and signature. So with that, does anybody have any questions about the MOU? If not, I will stop sharing my screen.
Oh, 1 second.
Oh,
Sorry, not necessarily about the MOU. I just want to take a step back to like the bulletins, advisories, and releases.
sure.
I'm more curious about like the threshold for determining when to issue one of those, and like the clearance process internally within the existing structure to get at to ultimately release one.
Okay, great. Well, Commissioner Moore said that's a great question. So in terms of the authority, there's a couple of touch points. First, we work with the Department of Budget Management when they ask for instance, it's called, I think it's Managing for Results, MFRs. There are certain advisories, certain kinds of documents and publications that we have to issue, and our base minimum for issuance is about 12 advisories a year, approximately 12 advisories, so once a month. So there's kind of a baseline target set in there. That's not the ceiling per se, that's the floor. Yeah, and in accordance with, the passage of House Bill 1052, there are requirements that we also issue information about best practices or, educating, the public, on alcohol and tobacco issues. And that's baked into the law that created the commission. So that's first and foremost kind of some of the reasoning behind why we issue such things, particularly to the bulletins. The bulletins are really interpretive guidance. So what we do is we will usually receive a question. So for instance, this particular bulletin was based on a direct inquiry from a solicitor and wholesaler concerning an issue. Now, that's not necessarily where it always comes from. There are times when our investigators or inspectors will go out there and see an issue that's consistent, that's being misinterpreted, by a large number of stakeholders. And it's almost, I don't want to liken it to the Supreme Court. I wouldn't put it that high, but the Supreme Court takes up a case when they see a lot of the various circuits around the country that are misconstruing the law. There's not a consistent application of the law or an understanding of the law. So what we're taking a step back and applying that, metaphor to the ATC, when we see across various counties a different application of state rules and regulations, that's when we kind of come into that space to say, okay, here is essentially how we interpret the rules and regulation. And that process includes, reviewing the law. There's an internal memo that's drafted. There is a review by our executive committee. There's a review by the executive secretary. If the executive secretary the executive director believes that, the attorney general or the comptroller's office or any other body needs to weigh in, that is done. And then we'll issue the alcohol compliance bulletin for all of our stakeholders. Now, that's really those compliance bulletins. There are certain advisories that we issue, for instance, like it's time for renewal. This is how you renew your license. Here's how, and those don't deal with interpreting the code more than they are, please, here's a reminder, it's time to renew your license. This is how you renew your license. So they cover different subject matter levels and have different kind of weight. Is that helpful?
That's extremely helpful. I guess to that end, would it be possible to for those things to bubble up to us in some ways as they're bubbling up to you, in terms of the ripening that you see happening on the ground of a lot of folks are not really aware of this, or are not clearly in compliance due to kind of inconsistent understanding of the extent, so that we have a better sense of what's happening in terms of people's actual understanding and application of these regulations.
Sure, I think that's a great idea. In fact, we're working on an advisory now that I think that will be very helpful to the wholesaler and particularly the wholesaler and the retailer dealing with shelf stocking. So that's something that I think, and when I see Randy Barnett nodding his head, it's probably because he knows all about some of these issues. And so what we can do is maybe next time we could do a PowerPoint presentation on what is shelf stocking, how's it misconstrued, here's kind of an issue that we see, and this is why we think an alcohol compliance bulletin addresses those issues, because we see, and that's something that you'll see across the board. When can you stock a shelf? When should you never stock a shelf? All that stuff. So Commissioner Moore said, I appreciate the request, and surely we can do something kind of going forward in terms of these compliance bulletins.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
I think more than anything else, each of us has a different level of understanding. And so this is extremely helpful to make sure that we understand what the rules and regulations are, so that in case somebody says something to us, we know where to send them and what the interpretations are. So thank you very much, Tom.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else have any new business?
No new business, but I just want to comment. That was an excellent presentation. Gentlemen, thank you.
It's great. Concur.
Thank you, Chris.
Mr. George, thank you very much for stepping in today for our executive director. And Commissioner Morset, Commissioner Poole, thank you for making a quorum. We look forward to seeing everybody next month. I need a motion for adjournment,
Motion.
Motion.
and we have motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you all. Have a great month.
Thank you, gentlemen. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.